good morning. It is the 31st day of March already, 2021, and this video is going to be on something that you would probably not expect: foreign service and federal law enforcement. One thing that you'll find, probably if you look into it, to be very unusual. You would expect the Justice Department, obviously, to have law enforcement, federal law enforcement. And of course it does. FBI, DEA, marshals. And you would also expect Homeland Security to have law enforcement. They used to be all in the Treasury Department. Now they've moved over to Homeland Security, and they do. Customs, Border Protection, ICE, so on and so forth. One thing that you would not expect is that most federal agencies have some sort of federal law enforcement agents assigned to them, and the State Department is no exception. And specifically what I'm going to speak about, among other agencies, but primarily the Diplomatic Security Service, DSS, which has about 2,500 special agents. It's roughly half the size of DEA, and they work under the United States State Department. And they are law enforcement officers, but their primary job and most of their work assignment during a 20-year career, 25-year career, will be overseas in United States Embassies and Consulates. So what is a DSS special agent? Well, again, they're a federal law enforcement officer, and their role is their primary role when overseas, and most of your career will be spent overseas, is protecting the United States ambassador and diplomatic personnel, protecting the embassy and consulate from physical intrusion, and thirdly, protecting information. So number one, the job is primarily protective and security in nature. So that's an important consideration. Now they do have agents assigned in the United States as well, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Where are they likely to be assigned? Anywhere where there's a United States embassy or consulate. So there's only a few countries that we don't have diplomatic relations with, one being Iran, another one being North Korea. But just about everywhere else, we've got an embassy or a consulate. And again, your work is not really going to be so much with the host country counterpart as it would be with a DEA agent who's assigned overseas. Most of your work is just going to be assigned, you work for the ambassador, and you have to make sure that the embassy is secure, the premises are secure, the information is secure, all of the information systems, and there's alarms and cameras and everything else. You want to make sure that the embassy and the people are safe. Now, of course, U.S. personnel assigned overseas as part of a diplomatic mission have what's referred to as diplomatic immunity. So they're immune to the laws of the host country, the nation to which they are accredited. So U.S. ambassadors and United States diplomatic personnel and DSS agents, let's say in the People's Republic of China, they're not subject to Chinese law, okay? Nor are their diplomatic personnel who are in the United States subject to United States law or the law of any state they're in. So they have extraterritoriality. The embassies, their homes, their vehicles are all more or less sacrosanct. They cannot be touched, not supposed to be touched, by the host country or by anybody in the host country. Now, of course, the primary responsibility for the protection of a foreign embassy, whether it's overseas, whether it's here in the United States, it lies with the host country. So the U.S. government is primarily responsible for every diplomatic mission in the United States. And but each diplomatic mission will have its own security people who are assigned to that embassy. What are some of the pros of this job? Well, number one, you're federal law enforcement. Number two, you have good federal law enforcement retirement. Number three, you get to travel overseas a lot. This is the only job in federal law enforcement where most of your career will be spent overseas. Now, that could be a good thing. That may not be a good thing. Now, what does that mean to be assigned overseas as part of a diplomatic mission? That means your housing is paid for by the government. You're provided with a government car overseas. So those aren't concerns. Your medical care is taken care of by the government overseas, although you do keep your medical insurance for sure, right? And what do you do with your house here in the United States? Well, most of the people in there rent the house out while they're overseas, because you're overseas at least 3 years. You can extend it for another 3 years, and that way your mortgage is paid for. Hopefully, they don't trash your house too badly, and you can make money overseas. Okay, so those are good points. What are some of the bad points? Well, again, I know a number of people who are in that service because most of them are assigned to D.C. area. Why is that? Because that's where the State Department is located, and they live here, and then they're just assigned overseas, and they come back and do assignments here in the United States for a brief period of time, and then they go overseas again. And one friend of mine who was in Ulaanbaatar, and if you don't know where that is, it's in Mongolia. So it's you could get Paris or Rome. You're probably thinking of that, but you could also get some real unusual place that you may or may not want to go to. The only unaccompanied place that I'm aware of would be Kabul, Afghanistan, maybe Damascus, Syria. Some of these very high risk places. Okay, but besides that. It's your children would be educated. They go with you, and they'll be educated at the diplomatic school. So there would be a school for the children of English-speaking diplomats, and that's where they go to school. So that's good. If your children are college age, then they come back and forth, and there's a expense-paid trip that they get to and from a couple times a year. But of course, they go to school in the United States unless you can afford to send them overseas, but overseas their education is paid for also. So a lot of things are taken care of. Again, what would you be doing in the United States Embassy? Well, you have to protect the ambassador, so probably you're going to cart him around and his family members, the chief of mission, okay? Anyone else in the diplomatic mission who has a risk, that's an important thing. You'll be doing a lot of oversight of the security of the embassy. And with that, you do work with the host country just to protect the embassy from threats. Now, terrorism threats are greater in some countries than in others. In police states, they're not too bad because, like in China, there's not going to be a lot of demonstrations against the United States in China because the Chinese police will put everyone in a concentration camp if they do any kind of non-approved demonstration, non-government approved demonstration. In other places, like in Islamic countries, for instance, Pakistan, there is a lot of United States anti-U.S. sentiment, and so that's something that you'll work with. They supervise the Marine Guards, Marine non-commissioned officers, stand post at United States embassies and consulates. And they also supervise the technical people. Technical people come in every so often, more often in countries where they're trying to penetrate the embassy for intelligence purposes, and they will check, sweep for bugs, check for any sign of intrusion, whether it's in electronic media, whether it's they've planted a bug, whatever has gone on, they're going to want to look at that. Okay, what are the qualifications to become a DSS agent? You need to have a bachelor's degree with 2.75 grade point average or higher. You have to be 21 to 36 unless you have prior law enforcement. You go to Glencoe, Georgia for 3 months, and then you go to a training course that is strictly State Department in Blackstone, Virginia for another several months. And that particular course will teach you driving skills, how to get out of a mob, for instance, if you're carrying a foreign dignitary or a United States ambassador. Things like that, counterterrorism, more protective type of things. What do DSS agents do in the United States? Well, that is a good question. Number one, they protect the Secretary of State. So you'll be doing protective duties, kind of like a Secret Service agent, except you protect the Secretary of State. What else do? They investigate passport and visa fraud. So if somebody is being investigated for that, that falls to the State Department, DSS. Thirdly, they would also, in addition to that, do a lot of background investigations. The State Department does its own backgrounds, Most other agencies, the background falls to the Office of Personnel Management, which is an agency of the federal government. But the State Department does their own backgrounds, and as a DSS agent, you would be assigned to doing backgrounds in the United States. Fourthly, you would have assignment for protective assignment on foreign embassies in the United States. So you would be the counterpart, the host country counterpart, let's say of the Chinese Ministry of State Security officer who works in their embassy. And, if there's going to be a huge demonstration at the Chinese embassy, let's say the Uyghurs or Falun Gong or people who are just angry about COVID want to go to the Chinese embassy and demonstrate, well, of course, the United States government has responsibility to ensure the safety of that embassy. Okay, so that you would notify, obviously, the Metro Police, DC, but also, DSS would be involved as well, and the FBI or whoever has to be involved. But it's our job to make sure that those embassies are not overrun, like our capital was. If that were to happen, that would be a huge, huge embarrassment, and there probably would be retaliation, by the foreign country, So whatever we want, you never want the foreign embassies to be overrun. So that hopefully gives you some insight on what they do. What are the pros of it? Again, you're overseas. You can make a lot of money. You're working with ambassadors and high security and high-ranking people, or with the Secretary of State. What are the cons? Well, you're not going to do much enforcement work, and by enforcement work, I mean putting the handcuffs on people, serving search warrants, arrest warrants, locking people up. That's not going to be your thing. Okay, so if that's what you want to do, this would not be the agency to go to. Okay, what else could be a con of it? Well, being assigned overseas over and over and over, some of these places, again, as I said, are not garden spots. Now, you will be living in good quarters. US Embassy personnel and that, the government picks out a nice place for you to live. But, you may not be able to really go outside the compound too much. So your friends will be other people who work in the embassy. You may not get a lot of chance to travel around the country or see a lot. Now, certainly if you're in Rome or something like that, or Paris, yeah, it's going to be great for your family. But if you're in, Khartoum, I don't know where it is, the Sudan, okay, it's not going to be so great, okay? That's all there is to it. Or if you're going to be Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, there's going to be restrictions on what your family can do. Inside the compound, yeah. Where they live, yeah. But if your wife goes outside the compound, she's probably got to wear the whole thing, the whole getup. Or risk being stoned or something like that. So, these are considerations for sure. And you could get one of the stands, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. We've got embassies in all of these places. And not all of them are garden spots, Some of them... they have religious beliefs and cultural beliefs that are very different than what Americans are accustomed to. Now, what about other agencies that have foreign agents, that have agents assigned overseas? And the one that would have the most is my former agency, the DEA. Now, unlike DSS, you're not hired to work overseas. You're hired to work in the United States, but we have about 250 to 300 agents out of a force of about 6,000 agents who are accredited as diplomatic officers to foreign countries, primarily to foreign countries that have drug problems. And our biggest agent contingents are in Mexico, Colombia, Thailand, and Afghanistan. And immediately you see like two of the four at least, they're probably, they're okay to go to. One of the four is a non-accompanied tour, Afghanistan. The Kabul office in Afghanistan, you have to go by yourself because your family cannot go for safety reasons. But if you are in Mexico, Colombia, or Thailand, what would your role be? Well, in those countries, because they are considered source countries, and also in Afghanistan, you would work a lot with the host country personnel. You do a lot of training. There are what is referred to as vetted units. What is a vetted unit? These are local officers from that country who receive extra pay and training. Now, this is worked out with good efficiency in some countries and not good efficiency in other countries. In Mexico, it's been a disaster. Okay. In Afghanistan, it's not really working out too well. In Colombia, I think it worked out pretty well. In Thailand, it worked out exceptionally well. But in Mexico, after the election, after President Biden was elected, and they waited until the election was over, and then after the election was over, what happened was the Mexican government then passed a law which says if DEA works in Mexico at all, they must must turn over everything to the Mexican police. So your sources and methods have to be turned over to the Mexican government. Now that immediately puts an end essentially to any cooperation. Why would that put an end to cooperation? Because the Mexican police are corrupt, okay? I mean, big surprise. So DEA would do investigations in Mexico. We would run informants in Mexico. We would, and then pass that information on to the U.S. But if we have to turn over everything to Mexico, and they didn't do it when previous administrations were in, but they knew that when this one comes in, it's an opportunity for them, for the criminal cartels that control the country. Okay, what else do they know? Well, there's also ICE officers assigned to those countries, and prior to, again, this administration coming in, there had been pretty strict agreements with regards to people who wanted to come to the United States. Now, again, the illegal immigration of people into the United States is controlled by cartels. Okay, these aren't just people walking miles and miles and walking across. And the drug transportation, the drug trafficking organizations are cartels. Now, when you deal with a criminal, okay, niceness is often perceived as weakness. Anyone who's worked in a jail knows this. If you give a guy your Snickers bar because he says he's hungry, the next day he's going to come for the next six, and it's going to go on and on. Pretty soon everybody's going to come for something. They perceive that as weakness. And the narco traffickers who run Mexico, okay, and it's run by drug cartels. I mean, up to the highest ranks of the police and the government, these people are not trustworthy. And the reason they're not necessarily bad people in terms of morals, but they're told, either you do what we say or we're going to kill you and your family. So you get a big choice here. Okay, so, and because their government has no real effective control, a lot of them then collaborate with the drug traffickers. So what we've seen, again, since December, after the election was certain, you've seen a huge flow of migrants into the United States, mostly children. And of course, while the gringos are tied up processing them, they're laughing because they're running drugs across the border like crazy. And they know that the seat is vacant, basically. Sede vacante, as they used to say with the popes, it was a vacant seat. There's someone there, but he's not really there, essentially. He's not capable of dealing with the problem. And they understand that. Okay, these people are professional criminals. And I'm not getting into politics, whether you like one president, you don't like. This is just simply a fact, as I see it. They're going to flood the country with people. They're going to flood the country with drugs because there's nobody really minding the store. Okay, there's nobody minding the store. And the people that he has advising him, again, they're supposedly the best and brightest, but where do they come from? They come from Harvard. They come from Yale. A lot of these people have never been in a fist fight. Okay, they don't understand how the world works, and they've never been in a stand-up fight, much less dealt with criminals. So the way they see things is very different than the way you would see things as a law enforcement officer or someone with some street experience. And if you don't have that experience, you get it pretty quick in law enforcement. So that I don't see our cooperation with Mexico, lasting much longer. I don't see the Afghan government lasting very long after we pull out. And Afghanistan has now become a major source of opium. DEA also has officers in just about every country throughout the world, but just one or two agents. You'll have a country attaché who's a GS-14 and a GS-13. And mainly their jobs are representational. They pass on leads to the foreign national government, and they receive leads, from the foreign government to the United States. So if the Chinese want something or the Laotian government wants something from somebody in Minneapolis, they go to the DEA country attaché He sends the cable to the Minneapolis district office. They obtain the information. It comes back to DEA, and then it's passed on to the host country government. We decide what's passed on and what isn't. Okay, they do not reach out directly to state and local agencies because they can't. Okay, state and local agencies cannot negotiate with foreign governments. The FBI has legats, GS-14s, legal attachés, and ICE also has officers in foreign countries. Now, the difference between DSS and these other agencies is that the agents who are assigned overseas are senior agents or supervisory agents. So you put in for those jobs when you reach a supervisory level or a senior agent level. You cannot join the agency and go overseas immediately. That doesn't work. Once you reach at least GS-13 in the DEA, and I presume the same in the FBI, well, then you would apply for a foreign office and be selected for it. So hopefully this has been somewhat helpful to you. Just give you a little bit of insight on U.S. federal personnel overseas. If you have any questions, send them to me. I think my next video will be on Homeland Security, more of Homeland Security, namely the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Okay? Have a good day.